Back in the day, my rendering took me hours and hours to do. I spent so much time rendering details that nobody would even notice in the final piece. It left me feeling so frustrated with my work and left a lot of unfinished pieces lying around on my computer that I never completed. I knew I had to rethink my workflow in a way that would let me become more efficient in my work without sacrificing quality. In this video, I will take you through my step-by-step approach to rendering. I will cover things like a way to structure up your sketch that will set your paintings up for success. How to organize your layer in a way that will allow you to go back and change anything in the process. I will also talk about the difference between soft, hard, firm edges and how to use them for appealing result. What shadow mapping is and why it is a game changer for a more efficient way to render. And my mindset when it comes to choosing a brush to paint with. First things first, instead of clicking around and try to find a tool, you can use shortcuts instead to make the process faster. Here are the ones I use the most. Alright, before I even start to render, I do a sketch. For me, sketching is the most crucial part of the entire process. It's during this stage where I solve visual problems and decide on good shapes before I dive into more refined work. I want to avoid trying to solve big problems like shape design when I'm a couple of hours into my painting. So let's start off with the most simple and biggest shape in the image first, using a regular pencil brush and stay zoomed out during this part of the sketching phase. Now, why would we want to be zoomed out while we work on the sketch? This is so we can focus on the overall image and not get stuck on any particular detail to noodle away on. We want this to be as efficient as possible. When I feel like the big silhouettes of the hair, face, ears, etc. are readable even in small format, I will erase the sketch a little bit and start with the smaller shapes. I flip my canvas pretty often. This is to get a fresh eye on things and correct it with the lasso tool or the liquefying tool to make it look more balanced. When I'm done with my sketch, I start to block out something called local colors. Now, what are local colors? Local color is the base color of an object, and in its purest form without the color of light or shadow thrown into the mix. You can see local color the most in diffuse and natural light scenario. In other terms, on a cloudy day, deprived from the yellow sunlight and fun. If you are unsure what to look for, I would suggest color picking the midtone of the image and place the color on the side. This is not to use in the image, but as a little helper to know if you are on the right track or not when you pick your local colors. I separate all the objects into separate layers to have more control over the colors, and if I need to change something, I can do that on a whim without it affecting all the other colors. For example, I keep the skin on one layer and hair in another layer. To change one of them, I can use color balance or hue saturation layer adjustment to tweak the colors and to match the reference image as much as possible. During the sketching phase, I double check if the silhouettes of the different objects looks good and easy to read. To demonstrate what I mean, let's turn off the sketch layer. If you can tell what you are looking at without the sketch, you are going in the right direction. After we have picked our local colors, the next step is to add some color variation. I use an airbrush with a little bit of texture to it, and do some gradation on different areas to make it look more interesting and not just one plain color. I add some redness on the cheeks, yellow on the forehead and blue around the mouth on an overlay layer. People talk about skin color zones, which you can find everywhere online. They are a good starting point to block in those colors in this stage. Now let's talk about the meat of the entire rendering process, shadows. Nailing down shadows is the most important step in the entire rendering process. If you can establish a good looking shadow design, I promise the rest of the painting will be a walk in the park. But what actually makes a good shadow design? It really just boils down to how you analyze your subject and how you break it down into clear shapes. A pro tip here is to squint your eyes and focus on the silhouette of the shadow. It blurs out the details and helps you focus on an overall silhouette of the shadow. For example, in this study that I'm doing, I see these shapes in the shadow. I like to use the lasso fill to block these shapes out quickly and choose to merge the shadow on her body to keep clear focus on her face. If you are unsure how light hits the face, you can check out the Azaro head. It is an amazing resource to understand the planes of the face and a helpful tool for designing your light and shadow shapes. You can find free Azaro head resources on Sketchfab or Pinterest. Once we got the shape down, we need to talk about edges. A hard edge is what you might expect. It is a crisp transition between shapes. It looks something like this. My go-to is the lasso fill to create a hard edge, but you can also use a hard brush as well. Then you have something called a soft edge, which is a more blended and blurry edge and can be created super easy with an airbrush. And then we have a firm edge, which is a blend between soft and hard edge. It might sound very complicated, but it's not. You can create this very gently, blending the edge of a hard shape with the blend tool. It should be slightly softened, but not too much, since it will transform it into a soft edge and we don't want that. So why bother with all these different edges and what is the purpose? It is all about using it as a tool to direct the viewer's eye and describing volume. Soft edges can feel like they are losing focus, like a camera, and can be used when you don't want areas to grab a lot of attention. You can use soft edges to achieve that. Firm edges can help out to describe round forms. You see me using that a lot for the skin in my study. Hard edge can be used to get more attention to something and define a detail. Finally, let's talk about color. A great way to create contrast and interest to your shadow color is to play with color temperatures. If your light is warm, make your shadows cool, and vice versa. Since my light source in the image is on the warmer side, I will pick the skin and tint the color and nudge it slightly towards the gray-yellow tones for the shadows. It will appear more green next to an orange color. I will do the same for the rest of the piece, and I'm using primarily multiply layers for the shadow. It still looks a little flat, even with the shallow colors in place. We need some extra flavor to make certain objects pop even further. And to do that, we can add something called an occlusion shadow. Now, what is an occlusion shadow? Ambient occlusion occurs in tight crevices where two objects touch and the light can't reach, which creates a darker type of shadow. To give an example on where you can see this happen is on the lips here, where we have two shapes touching one another and creating a darker line where the light cannot reach. I use an airbrush for this and the lasso tool to give it an edge where two forms meet and a little bit of blur as it transitions into the shadows. Look how that creates a lot more dimension to the painting. When we have finished painting our shadows, it is time to shed some light to the piece. On an overlay layer, I will do the same thing that I did for the shadows, where I map out the shape of the light as well. If there's an edge that I want some extra attention to, like underneath the eye, I can put light right next to the shadow to make that part pop even more. As for the highlight, I use it very sparingly and only on places where I want the most attention. And I usually add it next to the tear duct. On the eyes is a very reflective material, and on the nose. Now for the fun part. We are going to merge all the layers together and start to paint over to unify the piece. When it comes to brushes, a good rule of thumb when picking a brush is to find one that mimics the material or painting style that you are going for. But I'm going to be honest here, there is no magic brush. I have seen artists creating stunning art pieces, nothing but the standard Photoshop brushes. It's all about experimentation and how you choose to use the tool in the end. However, the real secret to a good painting is not a magic brush, but to have a good grasp on how to paint different materials. When you can capture the differences between skin, cloth or metal, it will help you greatly in the believability in your piece. While I'm painting, I try to keep a flow in mind. My strokes are following the structure of the face, and I use a mix of straight, curved brushstroke throughout the piece. You want to be intentional and clear with your direction of the brushstrokes that you are putting down. A pro tip if you are struggling with this is to do master studies. They are absolute the best to learn from if you want to become better and more intentional with your brushstrokes. And this is my complete render workflow. By focusing on good shadow map will save you tons of time and frustration when you paint. I hope this video was helpful. Let me know in the comments what you want me to show you next, and if you like to show you anything specific, like how to render different materials like metal or fabrics. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.